$10 million inheritance from my grandfather was supposed to be a blessing. Instead, it became a poison, peeling back the mask of my husband's fraudulent affection. It forced me to suffocate their every luxury to save what was left of my self-respect. Before the story begins, let me know in the comments what city or state you're from. I'd love to know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help this channel grow. The sharp scent of detergent burned Alina's nose as steam rose from the freshly pressed clothes stacked beside her. Only 3 days had passed since her grandfather's funeral, the only person who had ever truly understood her. The grief still tore at her chest, raw and unhealed. But in this house, sorrow was not something she could afford to feel. "Alina, hurry up. Jess wants something to drink." Brenda's piercing voice sliced through the wall. Alina carefully placed the iron down, her fingers trembling. She wiped the sweat from her forehead. Ever since marrying Mark 2 years ago, she had gone from being a beloved granddaughter to little more than an unpaid servant. Mark always insisted that serving his mother and sister was the secret to a happy marriage. But lately, Alina had started asking herself, is happiness supposed to feel this painful? She walked into the living room holding a glass of orange juice. Jessica lay sprawled across the couch, scrolling endlessly on her phone. "Took you long enough," Jessica muttered without even glancing up. "I'm dying of thirst." She took a sip, immediately grimacing. "Too sour, make it again." Alina said nothing. She quietly took the glass back, swallowing the words she wanted to say. Before she could leave, a firm knock echoed from the front door. A middle-aged man stood outside, dressed in a dark, perfectly tailored suit. His neatly combed gray hair and composed posture radiated authority. In his hand was a leather briefcase bearing the insignia of a prestigious law firm. "Good afternoon. Is this the residence of Mrs. Alina Morgan?" he asked politely. Alina hesitated. "Yes, I'm Alina. May I ask who you are?" "My name is Mr. Peterson. I was your grandfather's attorney." Her heart skipped. Brenda, who had been secretly listening, suddenly appeared, her curiosity impossible to hide. "Oh, please come in," she said quickly, forcing a warm smile. "Alina, don't just stand there. Prepare tea for our guest." Alina moved to the kitchen, but her ears stayed focused on every word. "Mr." Peterson declined to sit, and instead asked Alina to take the main chair as he opened his briefcase. "In accordance with the final will and testament of Mr. Arthur Morgan," he began, his voice steady, "all assets, land, property, and financial holdings are to be transferred entirely to his sole granddaughter, Mrs. Alina Morgan." Jessica sat upright instantly. Brenda froze. "The total amount after tax deductions is $10 million. The room went silent. Alina felt as if time had stopped. $10 million, she whispered. Tears filled her eyes, not because of the money, but because her grandfather had thought of her until his very last breath. Jessica's voice trembled with excitement. $10 million, Mr. Peterson placed a folder on the table. These documents require your signature to finalize the transfer. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Brenda's expression transformed. Where there had once been disdain, there was now greed disguised as affection. "Oh, Alina, dear," she cooed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Don't cry, your grandfather would be so proud." "Jess." "Bring her water, hurry." Jessica rushed off obediently, something Alina had never seen before. Mr. Peterson looked at Alina meaningfully. "These assets belong to you alone. No one else has any claim without your permission." Alina nodded slowly and signed. The moment the pen left the paper, she felt something heavy settle inside her, not wealth, but pressure. After the lawyer left, everything changed. "You mustn't tire yourself anymore," Brenda insisted, practically forcing tea into her hands. "We'll take care of everything." Alina felt sick. They weren't caring for her, they were serving the money. That night, Alina locked herself in her room. She stared at her phone, thinking about Mark. Would he change too? Fear crept in. This inheritance, meant to protect her, now felt like bait attracting predators. She made a quiet decision and messaged Mr. Peterson asking him to keep her account details confidential, even from her husband. It was the first wall she built. The next morning, everything felt unnatural. The house was calm. Breakfast was prepared. Smiles were everywhere, but none of them were real. Brenda began hinting at renovations, disguising demands as embarrassment. Soon after, Mark arrived with his friend Kyle. Kyle's presence was no coincidence. They began suggesting a luxury house, framing it as a gift for Brenda. Alina corrected them calmly. "It's my inheritance." The tension snapped. Guilt, pressure. Manipulation. Surrounded from all sides, Alina reluctantly agreed to at least see the house. But she knew this was only the beginning. Later, she secretly contacted Mr. Peterson again, asking for financial checks on Kyle and legal safeguards for future purchases. She was learning. She had to. Soon after, she discovered Jessica had stolen her credit card and bought an expensive designer bag. When confronted, Jessica brushed it off. Brenda defended her. Mark sided with his sister. "You've changed," he accused. "You've become selfish." That broke something inside Alina. That night, she froze all shared financial access. The storm came instantly. Cold silence filled the house. Then came the next demand, a lavish party at a 5-star hotel. Exhausted, Alina gave in. At the party, she stood alone while Brenda and Jessica basked in attention. Then, on the balcony, she heard the truth. Brenda was lying. She was telling everyone that the money belonged to Mark, that Alina was just a dependent. Her grandfather's legacy erased. Alina's chest tightened. She looked at Mark. He heard everything and said nothing. In that moment, everything became clear. She was never family. She was an asset, a resource, prey. Alina stepped back into the shadows, her heart steadying with a cold realization. She took out her phone. "Mr. Peterson, tomorrow at 9:00 a.m., I will come to your office. I want to restructure all asset access and investigate Mark's finances. I will not let them rewrite my history." She turned off the screen. When she returned to the party, Brenda called out sweetly, a voice that now sounded like the hiss of a snake. "Alina, darling, come over here. Mrs. Adler wants to ask you about your new house." Alina smiled. It was the first truly cold, calculating smile she had worn. She walked towards them, knowing that starting tomorrow, the role of the obedient daughter-in-law had died on that hotel balcony. She would let them enjoy their last night in the clouds before she pulled the earth out from under their feet. Alina now knew that Mark wasn't just a spectator. He was an active participant in the systematic destruction of her self-worth. A risky decision had been made. An open war fought through legal and financial channels was about to begin. The crystal chandeliers in the hotel ballroom may have been turned off, but the echo of Brenda's lies kept replaying in Alina's head like a broken record. All night after the party, Alina stared at the bedroom ceiling, realizing that every inch of this house had become a silent battlefield. She no longer saw Mark as her protector, but as a stranger who would steal her grandfather's identity for a fragile ego. Morning greeted them with an even colder atmosphere. Eleanor went down to the kitchen, hoping for a quiet cup of coffee. Instead, she found Mark and Kyle already at the dining table with several glossy brochures spread out. "Morning, honey." Mark greeted her with a tone that was far too cheerful, as if the betrayal on the hotel balcony had never happened. "Come here. I want to show you something incredible." Alina approached without enthusiasm. She glanced at the brochure. A fiery red European sports car with aerodynamic curves screamed expensive. Beside it, Kyle grinned arrogantly, twirling his own car keys. "It's the latest Porsche 911. Kyle chimed in, his tone overly familiar. "Mark needs this." The business contacts I introduced him to yesterday pay a lot of attention to what you drive. If Mark shows up in your old car, that sounds like a sewing machine. They won't believe you have $10 million in assets. It's about branding. Alina took a deep breath, a familiar tightness constricting her chest. "Mark, we just put down a deposit on that luxury house and now a sports car. What for? You haven't even officially gone back to work." Mark's expression changed instantly. His friendly smile evaporated, replaced by a sharp line of offense. "That's exactly why, Alina. I'm building a new business network through Kyle. You heard what Mom said last night. People know this success is the result of my investments. What will they think if they see me in an old sedan? They'll think I'm going broke, and it will destroy our reputation." "Whose reputation, Mark?" "The reputation built on the lie your mother told." Eleanor's voice trembled, but she fought to keep it steady. Mark slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "Watch your mouth. Mom was just trying to protect our dignity in front of her colleagues. Do you want me to be seen as a husband who lives off his wife? Do you want me to be humiliated because my wealthy wife is too stingy to fund her husband's ventures?" Brenda appeared from the staircase, apparently ready to add more pressure. She was wearing a new silk robe that Jessica had bought yesterday, her face caked in thick powder. "That's enough, Eleanor. Don't make things difficult for Mark. A wife's duty is to support her husband's ambitions. That car is an investment in his self-respect. You can't bear to let Mark be looked down upon by his peers, can you?" Alina looked from Brenda to Mark, feeling completely alienated. In this house, there were no more conversations about their future, about children, or about managing their lives wisely. Every word out of their mouths led back to money, status, and appearances. This house was no longer a home. It was a stock exchange where Alina was the main commodity. "I didn't say no, Mark," Alina said, trying to maneuver. She remembered Mr. Peterson's advice to stay calm so she could see how far they would go. "But the $10 million isn't all cash. A lot of it is in fixed assets. I need time to liquidate it through Mr. Peterson." Hearing a conditional yes, Mark's eyes lit up again. He grabbed Alina's hand and kissed it, a gesture that now felt like the touch of a leech. "Thank you, honey. I knew you were an understanding wife. Kyle, please arrange a test drive for this afternoon." "You got it, boss," Kyle exclaimed with a triumphant laugh. That afternoon, Alina was forced to go to the luxury car dealership. She sat silently in the back, staring out the window while Mark and Kyle excitedly discussed engine specs and top speeds. At the showroom, Alina saw the hunger in Mark's eyes as he caressed the car's hood. This was no longer the simple man she had fallen in love with. This man was possessed by the shadow of a wealth that wasn't even his. While Mark was busy trying out the driver's seat, Alina stood at a distance in a corner of the showroom. She took out her phone. An email had arrived from Mr. Peterson containing the initial report on Mark's finances. Alina read it, her heart pounding, her eyes widening. Over the past year, Mark had taken out several large high-interest personal loans. There were also several suspicious transfers to Kyle's account labeled property investment, which turned out to be a sham. Mark had been trapped in a financial black hole all this time. And he was using Alina's inheritance as his life raft while pretending to be a hero. "Elle, come over here." "Try sitting next to me," Mark called out, his face beaming from inside the sports car. Eleanor forced a smile, though her heart was screaming in agony. She approached, but instead of getting in, she whispered in his ear, "Mark, I'll buy this car, but on one condition." Mark turned, frowning. "What condition?" "The car has to be in my name, and you have to sign an agreement that if anything happens to our marriage, the car returns to me, no questions asked. It's a procedure from Mr. Peterson to secure the inheritance assets." Alina lied, her tone perfectly convincing. Mark hesitated. His male ego was pricked, but his desire to show off the car was far greater. He glanced at Kyle, who was waiting with a thumbs up. Mark nodded quickly. Of course. It's just a formality, right? It's not like we're ever going to split up." Alina nodded slowly, even as the plan to truly leave him was already forming in her mind. She had just made another risky move, giving them another expensive toy, but this time with a leash firmly attached. That night, as the red sports car sat parked proudly in front of their old shabby house, Eleanor stood on the small balcony, looking down at it with a cold gaze. She realized a new crushing truth. Mark had completely sold his soul to Kyle and his mother's greed. Eleanor was no longer dealing with a misguided family. She was facing organized predators. She sent another message to Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, execute phase 2. I want every transaction from the household account. Mark has access to monitored hourly. Let him feel like he's won for a little while. I want to see just how far they'll dance on the fire they've lit themselves. Eleanor closed and locked the balcony door, a symbolic gesture that access to her heart was now completely sealed off from the man laughing proudly below. The red sports car was parked under a dim street light, looking like a blood stain on the faded asphalt in front of their house. For Mark, it was a trophy. For Eleanor, it was a monument to betrayal purchased with a bitter taste in her mouth. Every time she looked at that car, she felt as if a part of her grandfather's soul had been turned into a piece of roaring, arrogant metal. That night, Eleanor sat at her small desk trying to focus on the asset report Mr. Peterson had sent. Her concentration was broken when her phone vibrated violently. K.H. Lowe's name flashed on the screen. "Elle, are you asleep?" K.H. Lowe's voice was frantic and furious. Chloe wasn't just a friend. She was a witness to Eleanor's entire journey and hated injustice more than anything. "No, Chloe, what's wrong? I'm sending you something. Look at it now." "I'm at a company event at the Sky Lounge downtown, and I just saw something that made me want to puke." Eleanor opened K.H. Lowe's message. A short video and several photos appeared. In the dim blue-lit ambience of a lavish bar, Mark was sitting on a velvet sofa with Kyle. Bottles of expensive liquor lined their table. Mark was laughing loudly, holding a cigar while Kyle had his arm around him, whispering something. The next photo showed Mark handing a card, the supplementary card Eleanor had given him for emergencies, to a waiter with the air of a king. He just swiped for almost $2,000. Elle. I heard the waiter talking. He was telling everyone at his table that he just landed a huge deal. What deal? The deal to fleece his own wife. K.H. Lowe's voice rose in anger. Eleanor turned off her phone. A chill spread from her fingertips to her chest. $2,000 in one night just to show off to his friends. Meanwhile, a year ago, Mark had asked her to scrimp on groceries so they could pay an overdue electricity bill. Eleanor didn't cry. Her tears had seemingly dried up since the party on the hotel balcony. She walked to the living room, turned off all the lights except for a single floor lamp in the corner, and waited. At 2:00 a.m., the roar of the sports car's engine shattered the neighborhood silence. The front door creaked open, bringing with it the sharp scent of alcohol and cologne. Mark stumbled in, whistling a cheerful tune. When he saw Eleanor sitting in the darkness, he jumped. "Geez, Eleanor, you scared me." "Why are you still up?" Eleanor stood, placing her phone, still displaying the photo of Mark at the bar on the table. $2,000, Mark. For what?" Mark froze. His bloodshot eyes darted from the phone to Eleanor's face. His smile vanished, replaced by a rigid defensive scowl. "Oh, so now you're spying on me. You hired someone to follow your own husband. I don't need to hire anyone. The world is a small place, Mark, and your foolishness is much bigger. You said the car was for business, but you're just using it to get drunk with Kyle." Mark scoffed, throwing his jacket carelessly onto the sofa. "It's part of the networking, Eleanor. You know nothing about the business world. Do you think you get million-dollar deals by sitting politely in an office? I have to entertain important people. Important people. You mean Kyle and your parasitic friends?" Eleanor stepped forward, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "That's Grandpa's inheritance, Mark. That money is for our future, not to be burned in one night at a bar." Suddenly, Mark turned and punched the wall next to Eleanor. The thud made her flinch. He stared at her with a look of pure hatred she had never seen before. "Grandpa's inheritance. Grandpa's inheritance." Mark screamed in her face. "Ever since that money came, you haven't stopped insulting me with those words. What do you think I am? I am your husband, Eleanor. I am the head of this household. The head of the household doesn't steal his wife's credit card to party." Eleanor shot back bravely. "I didn't steal. I took what's rightfully mine as a husband. Mark jabbed a finger at her chest. Do you know how humiliated I feel every time we have to see Mr. Peterson? How degraded I am when I have to ask your permission to use money that, according to Mom, is really the result of this family's prayers and support. You no longer respect my dignity as a man. Eleanor, you're arrogant. You think because you have $10 million you can walk all over me. Eleanor was stunned. Mark's gaslighting was flawless. He was twisting reality, trying to make her feel guilty for the wealth that was legally hers. I never walked all over you, Mark. You're the one who threw your own dignity onto the floor of that bar, she said, her voice. Enough, Mark yelled. If you're going to keep counting every penny like this, then maybe we should be done. I don't need a wife who treats her husband like a beggar. You can hoard your money until you die and see if you're happy alone. Mark stormed off towards the guest room, slamming the door so hard the whole house seemed to shake. Eleanor stood alone in the now vast and cold living room. The words, "We should be done," no longer sounded like a terrifying threat, but like a warning bell. She realized Mark would never change as long as Kyle and Brenda were there to justify his ego. She walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of cold water to calm her heart. She looked at her phone again. Chloe had sent a new message. Overheard Kyle whispering about a power of attorney. Don't sign anything. A new wave of dread hit Eleanor. She now realized it wasn't just her financial security at stake, but her legal integrity. Mark was no longer just a misguided husband. He was a ticking time bomb, and the people around him were lighting the fuse. Eleanor made a small, risky decision. She wouldn't confront Mark again tomorrow morning. She would act defeated and apologize. But behind the scenes, she sent a brief message to Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, please change all my digital banking passwords tonight. And tomorrow, I want us to start moving the majority of the liquid funds into instruments that cannot be accessed without my physical presence and yours. I'm going to pretend to surrender so I can see what Kyle and Mark are really planning. Eleanor closed her eyes tightly. She was starting a charade within her own marriage, a dangerous game that might shatter her heart, but would ultimately save her life. The remnants of Mark's yelling still echoed in Eleanor's ears in sync with the relentless throbbing in her temples. This morning, the house felt like a silent stage play. As planned, Eleanor no longer responded with anger. She prepared breakfast with the mechanical movements of a programmed robot, swallowing the nausea that rose every time she saw Mark walk into the dining room with an air of arrogant victory. "Mark, I'm sorry about last night," Eleanor said quietly, her eyes fixed on her plate. The words felt like swallowing thorns, but she had to do it. "I was just tired." "I hope you're not angry anymore." Mark looked up, a flash of satisfaction in his bloodshot eyes. He sipped his coffee like a conqueror. Now that's more like it. That's a wife who knows her place. "I'm doing all of this for us, Eleanor, for our family's dignity." Brenda, who had been watching from the kitchen, quickly joined them. She sat opposite Eleanor, her usually harsh face arranged into a look of feigned concern. "Eleanor," sweetie Brenda took Eleanor's hand, her cold fingers feeling like a coiling snake. "I'm so glad you've come to your senses. I don't want any more fighting in this house, but there's one thing that's been bothering me. I couldn't sleep all night thinking about our future." Eleanor remained silent, letting Brenda continue her narrative. "That new house in Oakwood Estates, it's almost finished, right? I was thinking as a guarantee for my old age, and so that Mark can maintain his dignity as the head of the family. What if we put the house deed in my name?" Eleanor was jolted. Although she had expected it, this attack came sooner than she anticipated. "In your name, but the money is from Grandpa's inheritance, Brenda. It's a very complicated process to transfer the title midway." "What's complicated when there's money?" Mark interjected urgently. "This is for Mom's peace of mind, Eleanor. She's getting older. She needs assurance that she won't be thrown out by her daughter-in-law one day. Think of it as proof of your devotion. If you refuse, it just proves what people say is true. This money has turned you into an ungrateful child. The pressure was suffocating, squeezing Eleanor's chest until she could barely breathe. They were no longer just asking for amenities. They were demanding ownership. They wanted to strip away her foundation of security piece by piece. That afternoon, Eleanor asked for permission to go out for a while, claiming she had some administrative matters to attend to. She arranged a secret meeting with Mr. Peterson at a small cafe far from their usual routes. As soon as Eleanor sat down, Mr. Peterson slid a yellow folder towards her. "Mrs. Morgan, I must be frank, Mr. Peterson's voice was low and cautious. "I'm detecting some very unhealthy maneuvers from your husband's side. A few days ago, someone claiming to be Mr. Morgan's assistant contacted my office to inquire about the procedure for transferring asset ownership without the legal owner's presence." Eleanor's heart dropped. "They tried to do it behind my back." Mr. Peterson nodded gravely. "Fortunately, your grandfather protected this inheritance with very strict clauses, but the psychological pressure they are putting on you is their sharpest weapon. I must warn you, Mrs. Morgan, do not sign any documents. Don't be fooled by excuses about old age security, devotion, or anything else. If that deed is transferred to Brenda, you legally lose all control over that property forever. And I fear that would only be their first step in draining everything else." Eleanor clutched her purse. "They're pressuring me relentlessly, sir. Mark even threatened to divorce me if I keep counting pennies." Mr. Peterson looked at Eleanor with a fatherly gaze. "Emotional pain is difficult, but poverty at the hands of people who don't value you will be far more painful. If Mark truly loved you, he wouldn't make your fortune a condition for your marriage. Hold on, Mrs. Morgan. Let's use the time we have to secure the rest." When Eleanor returned home that evening, the atmosphere was even more tense. Sitting at the living room table was a stranger in glasses with a black briefcase. Beside him, Brenda and Mark waited with unreadable expressions. Eleanor, perfect timing. Mark stood and pulled Eleanor to a chair. "This is Mr. Evans. He's here to help us with the paperwork for the Oakwood House transfer. Mom has the documents ready. You just need to sign a few things." Eleanor stared at the stack of papers before her. Her hands were cold. She could feel Brenda's sharp gaze like a hawk, ready to snatch its prey. Jessica even emerged from her room, smirking as if watching an entertaining show. "Come on, Elle, let's get this over with. Mom is dying to start ordering furniture for her room there," Jessica urged shamelessly. Eleanor remembered Mr. Peterson's warning. She also remembered Mark spending $2,000 at a bar in a single night. If she signed this, she wouldn't just be betraying her grandfather's trust. She would be handing them the rope to hang herself. "I'm sorry, Mark, but I need time to read all of this," Eleanor said, her voice as calm as she could manage. "Mr. Peterson said there are some clauses about inheritance tax that need to be synchronized to avoid legal issues." Later, Brenda's face immediately soured. "What tax? You're just stalling, aren't you? You have no sincere intention of being a devoted daughter-in-law." Mark stood up, his face flushing with anger. "Eleanor, Mr. Evans came all this way. Don't embarrass me again. Sign it now." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. She felt like she was on the edge of a cliff with Mark and his family ready to push her off. The conflict raged within her, the fear of her marriage collapsing versus the strengthening instinct for survival. "I'll take these to my room to review tonight. I'll give you my answer in the morning." Eleanor stood and snatched the documents before Mark could react. "Eleanor, don't you dare leave this room," Mark shouted. Eleanor didn't look back. She went into her room, locked the door, and leaned against it, her body shaking violently. She had just made a very risky move, openly defying them in front of the outsider they had brought in. She knew there would be no peaceful sleep tonight. She picked up her phone and saw a new message from Chloe. "I heard Mark just borrowed more money from Kyle using the new house that's supposedly going to be his mom's as collateral. Be careful, they're desperate." Eleanor stared blankly at the documents in her hand. A new wave of dread hit her. She wasn't just defending her inheritance anymore. She was in the middle of a fraud conspiracy involving her own husband. Her small decision to take the documents to her room had set off alarm bells for Mark and his family. The Cold War was over. Now the real confrontation was about to begin. That night, Eleanor's bedroom door felt as if it would collapse under the furious pounding from outside. She had just managed to close her eyes after hours of studying the asset transfer documents she had hidden under her pillow. She shot up, her heart racing, anticipating Mark's delayed rage. But it wasn't a demand for a signature she heard. It was Brenda's hysterical sobs. "Eleanor, open the door. It's Jessica. Eleanor, Jessica's been in an accident." The voice was broken, filled with genuine fear. Eleanor immediately unlocked the door. Brenda was pale while Mark stood ready with car keys in hand, his face tense with panic. "What happened?" Brenda, Eleanor asked, her sleepiness vanishing instantly. "Jessica, she hit someone on the highway. Her car is totaled and the victim is in critical condition. They've taken her to the police station." Mark grabbed Eleanor's arm, pulling her roughly. "Hurry, you have to come. We need money for bail and the victim's hospital bills." Now, in the midst of the chaos, Eleanor's eyes fell on the empty key hook by the front door. The red sports car, the one she had bought in her name, which Mark claimed was for business, was gone from the garage. Jessica had taken it without permission, piercing the cold night with an ego as big as the sky, and ended it in tragedy. The police station felt tense and stuffy, the air thick with the smell of smoke and sweat. In a corner, Jessica sat hunched over, sobbing, her makeup streaked. But when she saw Eleanor, her expression changed. It wasn't remorse that flashed in her eyes, but a blazing anger. "This is all your fault." Jessica suddenly shrieked, pointing a finger at Eleanor in front of the officers. "If you weren't so stingy, if you gave me a decent allowance, I wouldn't have been so stressed out and needed to take the car to blow off steam." Eleanor was frozen to the spot. Her tongue suddenly let in. She turned to Mark, hoping her husband would defend the truth that Jessica had stolen the car keys from Eleanor's purse. But Mark looked at her with an even sharper, more judgmental gaze. "Jessica's right," Eleanor, Mark said, his voice low but pressing. "You've been putting too much pressure on her. You flaunt your inheritance, but let my sister feel like a beggar in her own home. She's stressed because she has to watch you act all high and mighty with your bank account every day. This accident is a result of the emotional damage you've caused." Brenda grabbed Eleanor's hand, squeezing it so hard her nails dug into Eleanor's skin. "You hear that, Eleanor? My daughter is in trouble because of your pettiness. Now stop talking. Pay for the victim's hospital bills and post bail so Jessica can come home tonight. This is your responsibility." Eleanor felt a massive blow to her gut. How could a criminal act and sheer recklessness be twisted to become her fault? Their emotional logic was completely dead, replaced by a horrifying collective narcissism. They didn't care about the victim fighting for their life. They only cared about Jessica's comfort and Eleanor's wallet. In the midst of the turmoil, Mr. Peterson appeared. Eleanor had contacted him secretly via text on the way there. The older man's presence was like an oasis in the desert for Eleanor's faltering spirit. "Mrs. Morgan, stay calm," Mr. Peterson whispered as they stepped away from Mark's family. "I've checked the initial report. This was purely Jessica's negligence. She doesn't have the proper license for that vehicle, and witnesses say she was driving at high speed while on her phone. But they're blaming me, sir. They say I'm the one who made her stressed," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. Mr. Peterson looked at Mark's family with a cold expression. "That is emotional manipulation, Mrs. Morgan. Do not let them shift their moral burden onto your shoulders. If you pay for everything now without any legal assurance, they will take it as an admission of your guilt. They will continue to use this pattern every time they make a mistake." Eleanor took a deep breath. She glanced over and saw Brenda trying to sweet-talk a police officer, mentioning that her daughter-in-law was a wealthy woman who could pay any amount. A wave of disgust washed over her. She remembered her grandfather, who had always taught her about responsibility. He had given her this inheritance to protect her, not to fuel the arrogance and crimes of others. Eleanor walked over to Mark and Brenda, her face no longer downcast. "I will pay the victims' hospital bills until they are fully recovered," she said in a flat tone. "That is my humanitarian duty to the victim." Jessica began to smile smugly, but the smile vanished as Eleanor continued. "But as for Jessica's legal troubles, I will not spend a single cent on bail or bribes. Jessica is an adult. She needs to learn to face the consequences of her actions for stealing my car and injuring another person. And don't you ever again use allowance or emotional stress as an excuse for this criminal act." "Eleanor, how dare you?" Mark stepped forward, his fist clenched. "You're going to let my sister go to jail. Where is your conscience?" "My conscience is with the victim who is currently in surgery." "Mark, not with the person who stole car keys from my own house," Eleanor replied without blinking. Eleanor's emotional state reached its breaking point when she saw Mark raise his hand as if to strike her, only to be stopped by the presence of Mr. Peterson and the officers. She realized that tonight she had ripped off the final mask of her marriage. Eleanor turned and walked out of the police station, leaving behind Brenda's hysterical screams, calling her a devilish daughter-in-law. Outside, the night air was frigid, but Eleanor felt even colder inside. She had made a monumental decision. She would hire the best lawyer for the victim, not for Jessica. She got into the cab Mr. Peterson had ordered. Inside, she sent a message to K.H. Lowe. "Chloe, find out who the victim's family is. I need their information as soon as possible. I'm going to take care of them personally without involving Mark." Eleanor's decision to side with the victim and let Jessica face the law was the riskiest step she had ever taken. She knew that after tonight, that house would no longer be safe for her. Mark and his mother would launch a more vicious counterattack. But for the first time since receiving the inheritance, Eleanor felt her self-respect beginning to breathe again, even as she braced for a much bigger storm in her own home. The atmosphere in the house, inherited from Mark's parents, now felt like a stuffy interrogation room. Dust motes dancing in the lamplight seemed to bear silent witness to the ever-widening rift since the incident at the police station. There had been no conversation. Brenda had locked herself in her room, her sobs occasionally amplified to ensure Eleanor felt guilty for letting Jessica languish in a holding cell. Eleanor sat at the dining table staring at her cold tea. The face of the accident victim's family haunted her. She had anonymously sent funds for the first surgery through Mr. Peterson. A small weight had lifted from her heart this morning, but in this house, she was a traitor. The sound of heavy breathing came from the front door. Mark entered with Kyle, the stale smell of smoke clinging to their clothes. Kyle didn't sit down. He stood near a wooden pillar, arms crossed with an intimidating stare. Mark, with calculated authoritative steps, pulled a chair out opposite Eleanor. "Are you satisfied now seeing my sister suffer in there?" Mark began, his voice low and trembling. Eleanor looked up, meeting the eyes of her husband, which now felt so foreign. "Jessica made a mistake, Mark. She has to learn to be responsible. I won't let Grandpa's money be used to bribe the justice system." "Justice?" Mark laughed cynically. A dry, piercing sound. "You talk about justice with your own family. You have $10 million, Eleanor. $10 million. But you'd let your sister-in-law sleep on a concrete floor over some ridiculous moral principle. You've truly been blinded by the numbers in your bank account." Kyle cleared his throat and stepped closer. "Mark, I told you when people get a lot of money, they start thinking they don't need anyone else. She thinks she can stand on her own. I bet she's already got a lawyer, not for Jessica, but to divorce you once her inheritance is all settled." Kyle's accusation was like gasoline on the fire already blazing in Mark's chest. He slammed his fist on the table, sending Eleanor's teacup, tumbling its contents, soaking the tablecloth. "Is that true, Eleanor?" Mark leaned forward, his eyes wide. Kyle said, "You've been moving assets around, canceling all the supplementary cards. Are you trying to slowly bankrupt my family and then leave us?" Eleanor felt an overwhelming pressure in her chest. The emotional wound was no longer just a sting. It had turned into a terrifying numbness. She looked at Mark, the man she once admired for his patience, now a puppet manipulated by his toxic friend. "I never intended to leave you, Mark." "But I can't let my inheritance be wasted on absurd things," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. "Then prove it," Mark snapped. "Prove that you still consider me your husband. Give me full access to your primary account. Give me power of attorney to manage the inheritance in my name as the head of the family. I need that money to get Jessica out to hire the best lawyers and to start the real estate business Kyle promised, so I won't be looked down upon by your colleagues anymore." Eleanor was stunned. "Full access? You know that's impossible, Mark." It was Grandpa's final wish. Mark stood up, his face a mask of dark resolve. "Then there's only one option. Give me access today or we're done. I'll file for divorce tomorrow morning." The word divorce slipped from his lips, but its impact felt like an explosion in Eleanor's soul. All this time, her marriage had been everything to her. She had endured her mother-in-law's insults and her sister-in-law's arrogance only because she loved Mark. But now that sacred word was being used as a tool for blackmail. "You're threatening me with divorce for money," Eleanor whispered, her voice with unshed tears. "I'm not threatening. I'm demanding my right as a respected husband." Mark pointed to Brenda's bedroom door. "Look at Mom. She's a wreck because of you. Jessica is a wreck because of you. If you really loved me, money wouldn't be an obstacle. Choose now, Eleanor, your fortune or me." Kyle smirked from the corner, a victorious smile that made Eleanor feel sick. She realized she was at the lowest point of her life. If she surrendered access, she would lose everything, including her dignity. If she refused, she would lose her marriage. Eleanor closed her eyes, picturing her grandfather's gentle smile. He had given her this money as a shield, not as a dowry for a marriage so easily broken by greed. "I need 24 hours to think," Eleanor finally said. It was a small, incredibly risky decision. She knew that in these 24 hours, Mark and Kyle would not leave her in peace. Mark scoffed. 24 hours? Don't even think about running, Eleanor. Kyle will watch the house, and I won't let you see Mr. Peterson alone. Remember, the choice is yours. Be a devoted wife or be a lonely rich widow. Mark and Kyle left, leaving Eleanor sobbing silently at the dining table. A new wave of dread hit her. She was now a prisoner in her own home. Every corner felt like a watchful eye. She realized Mark had truly crossed a line of no return. She reached into her pocket, touching her phone, which she had deliberately kept off. In her soul, a new courage was growing amidst the ruins of her heart. She had to make a big move before sunrise, or she would truly lose herself. With a trembling hand, Eleanor sent a short text to Chloe, the only person she trusted. "Chloe picked me up at the convenience store near my house at 3:00 a.m. Don't turn on your headlights. I have to get out of here." Eleanor glanced toward Brenda's room, where the sound of fake sobs still lingered. She knew the decision to leave this house was the first step toward the destruction of her marriage, but it was the only way she wouldn't be destroyed along with them. The chill in the room seemed to seep into her bones, not from the air conditioning, but from the menacing silence that followed Mark's ultimatum. Eleanor sat frozen on the edge of the bed, watching the clock tick down the remaining hours of the 24 she had requested. Her decision to fee in consideration was her only remaining shield, a way to discover just how deep a grave her husband was digging for her. The 3:00 a.m. escape plan with K.H. Lowe had to be aborted via a frantic text. Eleanor realized that if she left now without concrete proof of their malicious intent, Mark would easily twist the facts in court, painting her as a wife who absconded with the family fortune. She had to stay here in the lion's den to gather her final ammunition. A low laugh from the living room shattered her thoughts. She rose, walking barefoot to the slightly agar bedroom door. There, Mark and Brenda were talking to a young man in a patterned shirt carrying a small briefcase. "So, Mr. Evans, is the loophole strong enough?" Brenda's voice was filled with ambition, devoid of the sorrow she had been performing. The man whom Alina recognized as an assistant from the office of the lawyer Mark had hired, nodded, adjusting his glasses. He was a clinical, soulless type, clearly here as a technical executive. "Very strong, ma'am," Mr. Evans replied, his voice flat but piercing. "If we can prove that Mrs. Morgan has been psychologically unstable since her grandfather's death, we can file for a conservatorship. Full control of the $10 million in assets would then be transferred to her guardian, her husband, Mr. Morgan. We just need one more expert witness who can confirm that Mrs. Morgan has exhibited paranoid behavior towards her own family." Alina gripped the door frame until her knuckles turned white. Paranoid. They wanted to label her as mentally unstable just because she was trying to protect what was hers. "I can get that witness," Mark chimed in, his voice triumphant. "My friends at the bar the other night saw how she accused me of stealing her card. We can use that as proof that she hallucinates and is baselessly suspicious." The blow of this reality was more painful than any physical slap. A past wound Alina had kept sealed shut was ripped open. She was 10 years old again. Her parents just killed in an accident. Her uncle had tried to do the exact same thing, attempting to prove the traumatized little Alina was unfit to manage her parents' life insurance. It was Grandpa Arthur who had stood in front, held her tight, and fought in court for years to protect her. "Remember, Ellie," her grandfather's voice echoed in her head, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. "Money can turn people into animals. Never trust your keys to anyone who doesn't love your soul." Alina realized something that shattered her heart into a million pieces. Mark's affection over the past 2 years had likely been a long-term investment. He hadn't loved Alina. He had been waiting for her grandfather to die. Every hug, every sweet word when they were struggling, had probably been bait to keep her in his grasp until harvest day. Nausea churned in her stomach. She slipped back into her room before they noticed her. With a shaking hand, she opened a vanity drawer and found a small hidden key. It unlocked a small metal box where, alongside important papers, lay a tiny digital voice recorder her grandfather had given her for her college lectures. Alina took a deep breath. She couldn't just be a crying victim anymore. This betrayal was too systematic to be fought with tears. She had to retaliate in kind, cold, and calculated. She left the room this time with a deliberately weary and confused expression, exactly like the distressed person they wanted her to be. She walked into the living room, causing Mark, Brenda, and Mr. Evans to abruptly stop their conversation. "Alana, you're up," Mark stood, trying to look concerned, but she could now see the predator's glint in his eyes. "I'm thirsty, Mark," she said softly, glancing at the table where the draft petition for conservatorship documents lay open. "Sit down, honey, Mr. Evans is just helping me with some administrative things for the house." Mark lied without blinking. "You look so pale. Do you need a doctor?" "I have a friend, a great psychiatrist, who could help you feel calmer." Alina looked at Mark, swallowing the bile rising in her throat. "Maybe, Mark, maybe I do need help. My mind has been so scattered since Grandpa passed." Brenda smiled widely, a smile like a gaping wound. "See, I told you. You need complete rest, Eleanor. Just hand all these complicated matters over to Mark. Let him take care of everything for you." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I'll think about it. But could I have Mr. Evans's business card? I might need to ask him something about Grandpa's documents later." Mr. Evans handed her a card. "Of course, Mrs. Morgan. I'm here to ensure this family's interests are protected." Alina returned to her room with the card in hand. Once the door was closed, she quickly turned on her phone and, through the crack in the door, took photos of the documents on the living room table. A new kind of pressure hit her. She now had to play the part of a woman on the verge of a breakdown to buy herself time while secretly preparing a counterattack. She sent the photos to Mr. Peterson with a short message. "Sir, they are moving to have me declared mentally incompetent. Please prepare a counter-statement from a credible psychiatric institution by tomorrow morning." "I will pretend to go along with their plan tonight." Eleanor stared at her reflection. She no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. She might look fragile, but behind her eyes, a cold fury was solidifying into a grand plan. Her decision to stay one more night was the biggest risk she had ever taken, one that could cost her her freedom if Mark moved faster. But Eleanor was resolved. If they wanted to play games with legal loopholes, she would make sure that loophole became the grave for their greed. The cold that had crept up Eleanor's spine last night had now frozen into a solid wall of ice around her heart. As she sat at the breakfast table this morning watching Mark adjust his tie, as if he were the busiest executive in the city, she felt like she was watching a terrible play. She no longer saw Mark as her soulmate, but as an actor aiming for her life, or more accurately, the numbers in her bank account. "I'm heading out, honey." "Big meeting with some investors from Singapore this morning," Mark said, kissing her forehead. The kiss felt like the touch of a blood-sucking leech. Eleanor forced a faint smile, the kind she'd learned from TV dramas. "Be careful, Mark. I hope the project goes well." The moment the front door closed and the roar of the red sports car faded, Eleanor rushed to her room and locked the door. Her phone buzzed. A call from Chloe. She answered immediately, knowing every piece of information was now ammunition for her survival. "Elle, you need to sit down. I just got some info from HR at Mark's old company through a contact." K.H. Lowe's voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Just tell me, K.H. Lowe." "I'm ready for the worst," Eleanor replied, gripping the edge of her vanity. "Mark didn't resign to focus on his own business like he told you 6 months ago. He was fired. Eleanor dishonorably discharged for embezzling company funds to cover his personal debts from gambling and a bad investment with Kyle. All this time, he's been pretending to go to work, but he's just been hanging out at cafes and bars with Kyle." Eleanor swayed, sinking to the cold floor. So all this time, Mark had been using her savings even before the inheritance, not for their tight living expenses, but to maintain the charade of being a successful working man. Mark had lied to her every day, every hour, every minute, for months. He deliberately created a narrative of being a sacrificing husband to make you feel indebted. LKH Lowe continued. "And now that you have the inheritance, he sees it as a bottomless ATM to fill all the holes he dug for himself. Thank you, Chloe." "I'll call you back," Eleanor whispered. She hung up. Any shred of pity she had left for him vanished, replaced by a quiet, deadly rage. She wasn't dealing with a man who had made a mistake. She was facing a professional con artist, hiding behind the title of husband. 2 hours later, Eleanor was in Mr. Peterson's soundproof office, surrounded by law books that offered a false sense of security. Mr. Peterson sat opposite her looking 10 years older than he had at their last meeting. "Mrs. Morgan, their plan to have you declared mentally incompetent is a very real threat," he said, pushing some files toward her. "If his lawyer manages to file that petition with their fake witnesses, your assets will be frozen and transferred to Mark's control in less than a month." Eleanor looked at Mr. Peterson, her eyes no longer terrary. They were cold as sharp as a scalpel. "What do we do, sir? I will not let them touch another cent. We are going to transfer ownership of the assets into a discretionary trust," Mr. Peterson explained. "This is a legal instrument where the legal ownership moves to a trustee institution which I will head. However, you are the sole beneficiary. This means that legally you no longer own the assets directly. So Mark cannot file for a conservatorship to control wealth that is technically no longer your personal property." "Do it, sir, right now," Eleanor said firmly. "And please prepare a postnuptial agreement for separation of property, making it retroactive. I want every dollar he has used from my accounts recorded as a personal debt he owes me." Mr. Peterson nodded. "But you must be careful. The moment they realize their access is permanently cut off, they will become very aggressive." Eleanor returned home that afternoon with a heavier burden, but a more certain step. In the living room, Brenda was on the phone laughing about new diamond jewelry. Seeing Eleanor, she quickly hung up and put on her fake concerned face. "Eleanor, honey, you're back." You look exhausted. She paused. Mark called. He said there's an important dinner tonight with Kyle's colleagues. He needs you to prepare $50,000 as a down payment for their real estate partnership. Brenda said it casually, as if $50,000 were the price of a head of lettuce. Alina took a deep breath. This was it. $50,000 is a lot. Brenda, I need time to liquidate it, she said, staying in her role as the confused wife. No more excuses, Alina. Mark needs this for your future. Brenda snapped, losing her patience. That night when Mark came home, his face flushed from alcohol, he immediately cornered Alina in the bedroom. Where's the money? Kyle is waiting for the transfer confirmation tonight. Alina looked at her husband, the man who for 6 months had pretended to wear a suit to an office when he was just going to a bar. Mark, I've moved all access to Grandpa's inheritance into a trust, managed by Mr. Table Peterson, for long-term security. From now on, any expenditure over $1,000 must go through a legal and transparent audit. Mark's face went pale, then instantly flushed with rage. You did what? Without my permission, I am your husband, Alina. What do you think I am? I did it to protect you too, Mark. So we don't spend recklessly, Alina said softly, her eyes locked on his. Mark grabbed her shoulders roughly. Cancel it now. Call Mr. Peterson and cancel that trust. Do you have any idea what will happen if this deal falls through because the down payment is late? Kyle could sue me. Alina felt the pain in her shoulders, but it was nothing compared to his betrayal. I can't cancel it, Mark. It's a permanent agreement. You did this on purpose, didn't you? You want to destroy my career because you're jealous. I have a big deal going on, Mark screamed. Alina was silent. What career is he even talking about? His career as an embezzler. She didn't answer. She just turned her head away. A new wave of fear hit Alina as Mark slammed his fist into the closet door, shattering the mirror. Listen to me, Alina. If that money is not in my account by morning, don't blame me for doing something far worse than just filing for divorce. I will make sure everyone knows you are an insane wife who tortures her own husband. Mark stormed out of the room, leaving Alina amidst the broken glass. She bent down and picked up a small shard. She had just drawn a line of war that could not be undrawn. Her decision to lock down the fortune had driven Mark and his family to the brink of insanity. Alina made a small, very risky decision. She picked up Mark's phone, which he had left on the vanity in his rage. She needed access to his messages with Kyle tonight. She had to know how deep a hold Kyle had on her husband's life before she was dragged down into the black hole they were digging. The shattered glass from the closet mirror still littered the corner of the room, reflecting the pale, cold morning light. Alina sat at her vanity, her hands still trembling, but her fingers were tightly clutching Mark's phone. On the dim screen, she read a string of messages from Kyle that made her stomach churn. Mark, if that $50K doesn't hit by this afternoon, Sonny's coming to your house. You know he doesn't play around when it comes to gambling debts. Don't expect your wife's inheritance to save you when your head's on the line. Alina switched off the screen, a wave of nausea washing over her. The $50,000 Mark had demanded wasn't for a real estate investment. It was to pay off a loan shark. Mark had used her as a shield, a cash cow for sins she couldn't even fathom. The love she once cherished had completely rotted away, leaving only the foul stench of betrayal. Arrogant footsteps echoed down the hall. She quickly hid Mark's phone deep inside a drawer. Alina, get down here now. Brenda's voice boomed from the living room, all pretense of gentleness gone. Alina smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and walked downstairs. In the living room, Brenda and Jessica were seated regally. Before them stood a man in a neat uniform holding a black velvet case. He was a representative from an exclusive jewelry boutique. Ah, there she is, Brenda said, gesturing with her chin. Go on, sir. Show my daughter-in-law what we've chosen. The man opened the case. A set of diamond jewelry, necklace, earrings, and a ring sparkled blindingly under the dim light. The price Alina knew could buy a small house. This is the Eternal Bloom collection. Mrs. Morgan, the man said professionally, as ordered by Mrs. Brenda Morgan and Miss Jessica Morgan under your name 2 days ago. The total is $85,000. We have the card machine ready, or you can do an instant transfer. Alina's heart pounded. She looked at Jessica, who was triumphantly trying on the diamond ring. Looks good, right, Elle? I need this to fix my image after that incident. People need to know our family is still powerful, Jessica said without a hint of remorse for the person she had hit. Eleanor turned to the jeweler, then to Brenda. I never ordered this, and I did not authorize anyone to order luxury items in my name. The room went cold. The smile on Brenda's face vanished, replaced by a horrifying rage. Eleanor, what are you talking about? Are you trying to humiliate me in front of this gentleman? You're the one who said we needed to maintain our dignity. Dignity isn't bought with stolen money, Brenda. Eleanor replied, her voice low but steady. Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience. Please take the jewelry back. I will not be paying this bill. Eleanor, are you insane? Jessica shot up, slamming the ring back into the case. I told all my friends I was wearing this to the gallery opening tomorrow. How am I supposed to show my face? Take it away, sir. Now, Eleanor said firmly. The jeweler, sensing the chaotic family dynamic, quickly closed his case. Very well, Mrs. Morgan. However, there is a 10% cancellation fee that must be paid today. Bill, the people who placed the order, Eleanor said, gesturing to Brenda and Jessica. The moment the jeweler skirted out, the explosion happened. Brenda shrieked, throwing a vase to the floor where it shattered. You insolent girl, do you think you can just trample on my pride? Who do you think you are? Just then, the front door burst open. Mark rushed in his face, pale, his eyes wild. He had clearly just noticed his phone was missing. But the sight of his hysterical mother and screaming sister made him detonate. What is going on? He demanded. Your wife, Mark. Your wife humiliated me. She refused to pay for the jewelry I ordered in her name. She let that man insult me like I was some poor woman who couldn't afford her tastes. Brenda wailed, clutching her chest. Mark whirled on Eleanor, his eyes red with stress, likely from the loan shark's threats. He strode forward, grabbing the collar of her shirt and shoving her heart against the wall. You really want to play with fire, don't you, Eleanor? He hissed, veins bulging in his neck. How many times have I told you not to embarrass me, not to make my mother cry? That money was to pay your gambling debt, Mark, not for this jewelry. Eleanor shot back, her voice trembling but her eyes defiant. Mark froze, his hand raised midair for a slap. He was shocked, she knew. What are you talking about? I know everything. I know you were fired. I know you're in debt to a loan shark through Kyle. And now you want me to pay for your mother and sister's lifestyle while your own life is at risk. Eleanor laughed a broken sound, tears streaming down her face. You're a monster, Mark. You and your family are parasites sucking the life out of my grandfather through me. Mark snarled his grip on her collar, tightening, making it hard for her to breathe. Shut up. You don't know anything. If you don't give me that money today, I swear, Eleanor, I can't guarantee you'll walk out of this house in one piece. He drew back his fist, but before it could land, Eleanor spoke, her voice eerily calm. Go ahead, Mark. Hit me. Mr. Peterson is waiting for my call every 10 minutes. If I don't answer, he's sending the police and a medical team along with the divorce papers I signed last night. Mark froze his fist, trembling inches from her face. His breath came in ragged gasps. In the corner, Brenda and Jessica were silent, realizing the Eleanor they knew was truly gone. He released her violently, and she crumpled to the floor, coughing. Mark kicked a nearby chair to pieces, then stormed out of the house, slamming the door with enough force to rattle every window. Eleanor hugged her knees on the cold floor. The pain in her back and neck was nothing compared to the relief blooming in her heart. She had survived her first near-fatal physical confrontation. She held their trump card, but a new fear emerged. She couldn't stay here another night. A desperate Mark was a cornered animal. She struggled to her feet. She went to her room, grabbed a small bag with her passport, the original inheritance documents, and Mark's phone. She made a small, very risky decision. She wouldn't run to Chloe or Mr. Peterson. She would go to the hotel where the lone shark, Sonny, was likely staying. According to the texts, she had to face the source of the problem herself before Mark sold her out completely. She looked at her reflection. A red mark was visible on her neck. She covered it with a scarf her grandfather had given her and slipped out the back door, leaving Brenda and Jessica frozen in fear in the living room. The purple bruise on Alina's neck was hidden beneath the silk scarf her grandfather had given her. Every brush of the fabric against her skin was a sharp reminder of how cheaply the man who had promised to protect her valued her life. But beneath the physical pain, her spirit had achieved a lethal calm. Her fear had been burned away by the inferno of his betrayal. That afternoon, the living room felt suffocating. Eleanor had deliberately gathered them all, Mark agitated and red-eyed. Brenda, her face a mask of arrogant defiance despite her trembling hands, and Jessica slumped on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if the accident she caused was a minor inconvenience. In the corner, Mr. Peterson sat with his leather briefcase, his presence a silent testament to her grandfather's dignity. And of course, Kyle was there leaning against the doorframe, pretending to be a supportive friend, when Alina knew he was just a parasite counting down the days until the lone shark came for him. "Alina, what is Mr. Peterson doing here again?" Mark began his voice. "I need the money now." Kyle said, "Our investor can't wait past sunset." Alina looked straight into Mark's eyes, which now held nothing but greed and desperation. "That money is never coming, Mark." A heavy silence fell over the room. "What do you mean?" Brenda interjected, her voice shrill. "Alina, don't play games. Jessica needs money to get the victim to drop the charges, and Mark needs his capital. You promised. I never promised to finance your lies." Alina's voice was flat, but every word was a razor. "I know everything. I know Mark was fired 6 months ago for embezzlement. I know the $50,000 wasn't for a property deal, but to pay your gambling debt to Sonny through Kyle." Mark's face went white. Kyle flinched. "That's not all." Alina continued, ignoring Mark's sputtering denials. "I also refused to pay the $85,000 bill for jewelry that you and Jessica illegally ordered in my name. As of this moment, not one more cent from my grandfather's inheritance will go to any of you. Not for a luxury house, not for a sports car, and not to cover up your sins. How dare you?" Jessica shrieked, her face crimson. "Are you going to let us become poor? Are you going to let me go to jail? Where is your gratitude?" Brenda began to wail, beating her own chest. "Oh God, why do I have such a cruel daughter-in-law? You're a devil, Eleanor. You want to see us destroyed." Eleanor stood slowly. She unwound the scarf from her neck, revealing the stark purple bruise against her pale skin. The room fell silent. Even Mark looked away. "Who's the cruel one?" Alina asked, her voice a whisper. A single tear fell, but her voice did not waver. "I served you for 2 years without complaint. I gave you my salary, my sweat, my dignity. And you. You treated me like trash that happened to find gold. You loved my fortune, not my soul." Mark suddenly burst into a wild, hateful laugh. He pulled a crumpled set of papers from his pocket and threw them in Alana's face. "Then take your fortune, eat it until you die alone," he roared. "Those are divorce papers. I've already signed them. I refuse to have an arrogant, stingy wife like you. After we're divorced, I'll make sure everyone knows how rotten you are. I'll sue for my share of all the assets you bought during our marriage." Mark felt he had won. He thought the threat of divorce was the ace that would make Alina beg. But instead, Alina smiled a bitter, triumphant smile. She glanced at Mr. Peterson, who produced a blue folder from his briefcase. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan." Mr. Peterson's voice was calm but authoritative. "Mrs. Morgan officially filed for divorce 2 days ago, immediately after you attempted to physically assault her. And based on the clauses in Miss Arthur Morgan's will and the additional prenuptial agreement you signed when you accepted the sports car, all inherited assets are considered separate property and are not subject to division." Alina stepped toward Mark, who now looked like a shattered statue. "You're too late, Mark," she whispered. "Did you think I was still that weak? I was quiet not because I was stupid. I was quiet because I was sharpening the sword to cut you all off. Now take your divorce papers. I'll see you in court, and I'll make sure you walk away with nothing but your own debts." Kyle, realizing the situation had spiraled, tried to slip out the door. "Mr. Kyle, don't be in such a hurry," Mr. Peterson said. "Our legal team has already reported the suspicious fund transfers from Mr. Morgan's account to yours on suspicion of investment fraud. The police may be on their way to your residence as we speak." Kyle froze. Brenda collapsed onto the floor, sobbing silently. Jessica could only stare in horror. Mark looked at Alina with empty eyes, realizing the woman he thought was a puppet had just destroyed his entire world with a single cold glance. "Get out of this house," Alina said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Now!" Mark let out a scream of frustration, sweeping everything off the dining table before stumbling out, followed by his mother and sister, who looked like displaced refugees. Eleanor stood in the middle of the wrecked living room. Mr. Peterson approached and patted her shoulder gently. "You did very well, Eleanor," she nodded, but her heart was still heavy. She had won the battle, but she knew this was just the beginning of their true downfall. A new fear gripped her. She was alone in a house full of bad memories, and she knew a desperate Mark indebted to a lone shark wouldn't go quietly. She made a small, risky decision. She asked Mr. Peterson to leave, letting her be alone. She wanted to feel the silence, even though she knew that somewhere out there Mark might be plotting something far more dangerous than divorce papers. She clutched the phone she'd taken from him, waiting for one last text from Sunny that might determine who would be alive tomorrow. The silence that followed the storm in the living room was more painful than Mark's screams. Alina stood amidst the wreckage, her neck bare the bruise, a stark testament to the cheap price of loyalty in her husband's family. A cold relief washed over her, but it was hollow. Her 2-year marriage had been nothing but a long con. "Mrs. Morgan, are you sure you want to do this now?" Mr. Peterson's voice broke the quiet. He stood by the window, watching the cars retreat from the property. Alina took a deep breath, a sharp pain in her chest that wasn't physical. "Do it, sir. Cut all the strings. I want to see who they really are without my grandfather's money." It was an execution. Eleanor opened her banking app, and with a few taps blocked all supplementary credit cards held by Mark, Brenda, and Jessica. She also messed the asset management team to repossess all financed amenities. In a lavish downtown restaurant, Brenda sat surrounded by her socialite friends. Beside her, Jessica was ordering more caviar and Wagyu beef. "Don't be shy, ladies. This is a small celebration for Mark's successful real estate venture," Brenda announced, proudly fresh from telling a fabricated story about the new house. Suddenly, the restaurant manager approached their table, his face a stiff professional mask. "I apologize for the interruption," he said quietly. "We've just attempted to process the deposit for your additional orders, but the credit card in Mrs. Eleanor Morgan's name has been declined. It appears to be blocked." Brenda's laughter died. "What? That's ridiculous. Run it again. It has an unlimited limit." "We've tried 3 times, madam," the manager said, holding out a device showing the word blocked in red. "We also just received instructions from the account owner's legal representative that all third-party use has been permanently revoked." The table went silent. Brenda's friends began to whisper their gazes, turning sharp and contemptuous. "Then what about the bill for this lunch, which has already reached $5,000? The manager asked, his voice now firm. "If it cannot be paid, I'm afraid we'll have to ask you to leave and involve security." Brenda trembled. She fumbled in her purse, but every card she owned was tied to the same blocked source. The humiliation was swift and brutal. In front of the very friends she so desperately wanted to impress, Brenda was being thrown out like a beggar. Meanwhile, Mark was leaving an office building fuming. He headed for his red sports car, but stopped short. Two large men were chaining the wheels and slapping a repossession sticker on the windshield. "What the hell is this?" "This is my car," he shouted. One of the men showed him official paperwork. "Sorry, Mr. Morgan. We're from the leasing company. The vehicle is being repossessed on the instruction of the legal owner, Mrs. Eleanor Morgan, who has ceased all payments." Eleanor, Mark growled, slamming his fist on the hood. He tried to call her, but his number was blocked. He was utterly stranded. Night fell. Eleanor sat on her balcony, watching the two security guards Mr. Peterson had hired patrol the gate. She had just received a report Brenda, and Jessica had to take a ride-share home as their car was also repossessed. They couldn't get into the Oakwood Estates house because the locks had been changed. Eleanor felt victorious, but the victory tasted like ash. She had broken them, but she had also cornered a wounded animal. Mark's phone, still in her possession, vibrated. A new message from Sunny. "Mark, I know you're broke, but I know your wife has a fortune. If you can't pay me by morning, I'm coming to collect my collateral. And it's not a car or a house, it's your wife's head." Eleanor dropped the phone. She realized Mark, in a desperate bid to save his own skin, had probably told the loan shark everything. Her decision to cut them off had just accelerated Sunny's deadly hourglass. A new terror seized her. She was now trapped between her thirst for justice and the threat to her own life. Mark had no reason to protect her anymore. Eleanor stood staring into the darkness. She made one last incredibly risky decision. She wouldn't run. She would stay here alone. She wanted to see who would arrive first. Mark begging for mercy or Sunny coming to collect. "I have nothing left to fear, Grandpa," she whispered into the night. Her hand closing around a small key in her pocket. The key to a safe deposit box, the one secret she had told no one. In the distance, the roar of a motorcycle grew louder, heading for her house. The emotional confrontation was about to become terrifyingly real. The roar of the large motorcycle outside the gate died, leaving a silence that was far more terrifying. Eleanor stood behind the dark living room curtain, her fingers gripping the safe deposit box key in her pocket. This was no longer about money. It was about her life. Outside, Mark dismounted along with a burly man covered in tattoos. "Sunny!" Eleanor opened the door. "I know you're in there," Mark screamed, his voice broken by the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose but his wife. Eleanor didn't move. She took a deep breath, remembering her grandfather's words. "Never let fear make you hand your key to the wrong person." She pressed a button on her phone. A silent alarm connected directly to the local police and Mr. Peterson. The front door was kicked open. Clear's throat, Mark burst in his face, a wreck, his eyes wild. Behind him, Sunny strolled in calmly, flicking open a switchblade. "Eleanor, please just give him the money." "Hell, let me go if my debt is paid. You have $10 million. What's $500,000 to you?" Mark pleaded, nearly groveling. Eleanor stared at her husband with utter disgust. "You brought him here, Mark. You brought a loan shark into our home to threaten my life so you could pay for your sins." "I don't have time for your domestic drama," Sunny cut in his voice, a low growl. "Simple choice, lady. Pay your pathetic husband's debt or you're coming with me as collateral." Eleanor looked from Sunny to Mark. She didn't see a husband. She saw a coward willing to sell her soul to save his own worthless life. Suddenly, the wail of police sirens echoed in the distance, cutting through the night. Sunny flinched, glaring at Mark with pure hatred. "You set me up," he snarled before darting out the back door. Mark collapsed, sobbing hysterically. He tried to grab Eleanor's legs, but she stepped back coldly. "Don't touch me, Mark. The police are taking you in for attempted extortion and your involvement with a loan shark. And tomorrow, we settle everything in court. The legal reckoning and a harsh reality." 3 months later, Eleanor walked down the wide courthouse hallway poised and calm. Beside her, Mr. Peterson smiled. "It's over, Eleanor. The judge has made his ruling. You are officially divorced from Mark." She paused, seeing Mark being led out of another courtroom in handcuffs. He had just been sentenced for embezzlement and his ties to the criminal underworld. He was thin, disheveled, the light gone from his eyes. Behind him, Brenda and Jessica trailed like ghosts. The three of them now lived in a cramped, squalid apartment on the poor side of town. Brenda saw Eleanor and tried to approach, but an officer held her back. Eleanor, forgive me. Please drop the charges against Mark. We have nothing. That apartment. It's so hot and small. I can't sleep. Eleanor looked at her former mother-in-law. Once those words would have made her feel guilty. Now she felt only emptiness. You can't sleep because the apartment is small, Brenda. Or because you finally realize you threw away the only person who ever truly cared about you. Brenda fell silent, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. Jessica just sobbed on her mother's shoulder. They had fallen into the pit of humiliation they had dug for themselves. Goodbye, Eleanor said simply and turned away without looking back. A new future, the Arthur Morgan Foundation. 1 month later, a building in the city center was adorned with fresh flowers, engraved in gold letters. Above the entrance were the words, "The Arthur Morgan Foundation." Eleanor stood at a small podium facing reporters and guests. In the front row, K.H. Lowe beamed with pride, her eyes misty. My grandfather's inheritance was never about the $10. Eleanor's voice was calm and confident. It was about a sacred trust to protect those without protection. This foundation is dedicated to helping women who are victims of financial abuse and families trapped by illegal debt. I want this money to be a lifeline for those who are suffocating under the greed of others. As she cut the ribbon, Eleanor felt the immense weight on her chest finally lift. She no longer saw the shadow of a bruise when she looked in the mirror. She saw a whole independent woman who had finally found her peace. That evening, she visited her grandfather's grave. I did it, Grandpa, she whispered, stroking the cool stone. Your money is no longer a curse. It's become a blessing. She stood watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. She took the small key from her pocket, the key to the safe deposit box, and tossed it into a donation box destined for a local orphanage. She no longer needed a key to feel safe. She was the master of her own life, but amidst the peace, she felt a new vibration in her soul. She had just realized that wielding the power of a foundation this large would attract new enemies, corporate predators who felt threatened by her mission. Her decision to audit all companies affiliated with Kyle had opened a much larger Pandora's box. Eleanor smiled faintly, a glint of unshakable courage in her eyes. Her journey had just begun. She took out her phone and called Mr. Peterson. Sir, prepare an additional legal team. We're launching an investigation into Kyle's parent company tomorrow morning. I want to make sure there are no more victims like me. Eleanor walked away from the cemetery with her head held high. She was no longer running from the storm. She had become the storm. Lessons learned. Money is a mirror, not a character changer. The $10 million didn't make Brenda, Mark, or Jessica evil. It merely revealed who they had been all along. Boundaries are a form of love. Setting financial and emotional limits isn't stingy. It's how you protect the people you love from being consumed by their own greed. Loyalty cannot be bought. Family ties may be strong, but betrayal is still betrayal. Don't let the status of family be an excuse for others to drain your happiness. The best investment is character. Eleanor's true inheritance wasn't the money, but the integrity and strength she learned from her grandfather. Money can be spent, but a strong character will keep you standing in any storm. Thank you for following Eleanor's emotional journey. Writing this story was an incredible experience, watching a character grow from her wounds into a force of strength. May this tale inspire you to know that no matter how difficult your situation, you always have the choice to draw a line and start a new chapter. See you in the next story.